You are listening to The Soul's Quiet Call, written by Akumah and voiceover by Sara.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 7, The Burden of Silence. The sun was beginning its slow descent into the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold. It had been a quiet day in the small coastal town, the air still damp from a morning shower. Meera stood behind the counter of her flower shop, arranging a bouquet of jasmine and lilies, her mind elsewhere. Aarav had been on her mind more than usual these days. He'd been distant lately, more so than she had ever seen him. His visits to the shop had become more infrequent, and when he did come, his eyes held a weight that she couldn't ignore. He was troubled, she knew that much. But what troubled him? Meera hadn't asked. Part of her didn't want to know, not yet. Her own emotions were a tangled mess. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something, her heart both eager and afraid to leap into whatever it was that was forming between them. She was lost in thought when the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new customer. Looking up, she saw Aarav standing there, his expression somber, the usual warmth in his eyes replaced by a faraway look that sent a shiver down her spine. "Meera," he greeted, his voice soft but distant. "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. She had learned over the past few weeks how to greet him with that smile, one that didn't give away too much of what she was feeling. But today, it felt strained. She couldn't mask the concern she felt. Aarav stepped into the shop, his footsteps heavy, as if carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. He didn't look at the flowers, nor did he offer the casual banter that had become their routine. He simply stood there, staring at the floor, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. "You, okay?" Meera asked, unable to stop herself. She felt the familiar pull in her chest, the desire to reach out, to ask, to fix whatever was broken in him. But she wasn't sure how to. Aarav didn't respond immediately. He was silent for a long moment, lost in thought. Meera could feel the tension between them, thick and suffocating, and it made her heart race. The words that had always come so easily between them now felt like strangers, tangled and lost. "I got a letter today," Aarav finally said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "From home." Meera's heart tightened. She could sense the shift in him, the subtle change in his tone when he mentioned home. It was a place he had rarely spoken of, a past he had been running from ever since she had met him. "What's it about?" she asked, carefully choosing her words, not wanting to push him too far. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face as if trying to erase the tiredness from his expression. "It's from my father," he said, the words coming out slowly, as though they weighed more than they should have. "He wants me to come back. There's something he needs to tell me." Meera watched him closely, her heart sinking at the rawness in his voice. He wasn't telling her everything, she could tell that much. But the mere mention of his father, of a family that had clearly left a scar on him, was enough to make her heart ache for him. "You don't have to go if you don't want to," she said softly, stepping closer. Her voice was almost a whisper, as though saying it aloud might make it real. "It's your choice, Aarav." He met her gaze, his eyes dark with a storm she couldn't see but could feel. "I don't know if it is," he replied, his voice tight. "It's been years since I've spoken to any of them. I've avoided it all. But now I'm not sure. I don't know what's worse, returning to face them, or staying away and living with this silence between us." Meera swallowed, unsure of how to respond. She had always believed in the power of connection, of understanding people's hearts. But now, she realized, there were parts of him, deep parts, that she would never be able to reach. His past was a part of him that he wasn't ready to share, and she had to respect that. "I can't imagine what you're going through," Meera said quietly, her voice filled with empathy. She wanted to reach out, to ease the pain she could see in his eyes, but she didn't know how. But I think you should do what feels right. Even if that means going back or staying away. It's your decision. Aarav was silent for a long time, and for a brief moment, Meera wondered if he had heard her at all. His eyes were distant, focused on something far beyond the flowers around them. I'm not sure I can go back, he muttered, his voice barely audible. It feels like opening old wounds, wounds that I've spent so long trying to forget. Meera's heart ached for him. She could see it, the weight of his past pulling him down, even now, despite the miles that separated him from his family. You don't have to face everything all at once, she said, her words coming out softly, almost as though she were speaking to herself. Maybe start small. One step at a time. Aarav glanced up at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. You always know exactly what to say, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. She gave him a small smile in return, but the truth was, she didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to fix this, how to help him face whatever it was that had been haunting him. I don't know if I can help you, she said, her voice breaking slightly, but I'm here. Whatever you need, Aarav. You don't have to go through this alone. He looked at her, his gaze softening, the walls around him seeming to drop just slightly. I know, he said, his voice quiet. I know you're here. But the problem is, he paused, as though struggling to find the right words. The problem is, I don't know if I'm ready to let anyone in. Meera felt a pang of something deep in her chest, something between sorrow and longing. She knew he wasn't ready. But she also knew that if he didn't face his past, if he didn't learn to speak his truth, they would always be standing on opposite sides of something too vast to cross. I understand, she whispered. I do. The silence between them deepened, thick with the unspoken emotions they both carried. Meera felt her heart heavy, but she didn't move away. She stayed, offering him the space to speak when he was ready, to trust when he was ready. But it was hard. It was so hard to watch him retreat into himself, to know that there was a part of him she couldn't reach, a part of him that might never let anyone in. The weight of the moment pressed in on her, but she didn't pull away. Not yet. I should go, Aarav said suddenly, his voice strained. I need some air. Meera nodded, though she felt a pang of disappointment. He wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. But as he turned to leave, she called out softly, Aarav. He paused, looking back at her. You don't have to carry it alone, she said, her voice low but steady. Whatever it is. Aarav's expression softened, and for the briefest moment, Meera thought he might say something more. But instead, he simply nodded. Thanks, Meera, he said quietly, before walking out the door. Meera watched him go, the door swinging shut behind him with a soft chime. Her heart felt heavier now, the burden of silence settling between them like a weight neither could lift. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, Meera knew one thing: no matter how heavy the silence became, she would be here when he was ready to speak.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Refer to the channel playlist for a better experience and close your eyes to let your imagination run wild. Subscribe.